seismic moment for the West Coast Eagles. An historic day for the wrong reasons yesterday at the time of this recording, Nest family, but one on which we all came together to pay tribute to Adam Simpson and to look forward to what is next for our football club, Drew Jones. This is not a situation the Eagles have ever faced in their history, an interim coach. And it is a situation where we are looking for a new one. That is the stability of the West Coast Eagles.
Yeah, g'day, Garby. Unexpected in terms of I didn't see us in this position after we beat Melbourne in round 10, but it's all happened very quickly. And, we've spoken about it the last couple of weeks. There's an inevitability about the fact that Adam Simpson wouldn't be our coach next season, but highly accelerated to the point where he did an interview with Ryan Daniels on Monday at 2:30 Perth time, and by 4 o'clock the conversations had started with Don Pike. That was after we were off air on AFL Tonight, so I'd been making calls and checking in with people in the West through the day to get any inkling if there was going to be any movement on his coaching future, and nothing came back to me by the time we went to air. And then, by Monday night and Tuesday morning, the wheels were very much in motion. Not unexpected given what has come before and the fact that he clearly wasn't going to get a new contract. And I think he sort of said it himself yesterday that he didn't want to go through that same process late in the season that he did last year. Ultimately, he kept his job, but this time around that wouldn't have happened. So I can understand why he wanted to spare himself that grief. Was there any part of you that got emotional yesterday? I was actually working. I was in the chair previewing the press conference, and then I didn't end up reacting to it off the back because we ran out of time. But there was a few moments where I felt a little bit sad and reflecting on, the high points of his coaching tenure. Did you feel that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you could tell that he was saddened. He accepted it. There was a brave face at times. There was the typical Simo jokes. There are also moments when he choked up a little bit. When he spoke about the media, you could tell that actually got to him a bit. Some of the toll it's taken on him and his family. Of course it was sad. And you reflect on the great times and then you just shake your head at something I'll get onto in a moment, shake your head on how it all went so wrong, so quickly, so badly. We don't go through football coaches like other clubs. It's uncommon for us. I think that's what resonates with me and what resonated with me a lot yesterday. We've had 4 coaches since 1990 and 4 premierships. Isn't that incredible? Every coach on average, even though Ken Judge didn't, delivers a flag. And to have only had 4 permanent coaches in 34 years, it's just these are events that are uncommon for us compared to other clubs. And we pride ourselves on that. And maybe that loyalty and yearning for stability, is a reason why it's fell apart so badly under Simo at the end. But he gave us the greatest moment you can have. He led another resurgence. He was always just, in typical Eagles fashion, a composed, classy leader who epitomised what we love about our football club so much, at the forefront of everything that's going on in the AFL for so long. Hasn't been the way for the last 3 years, but for the majority of his tenure there for 11, and we were in that position. So, yes, saddened in that sense. But then there's also a level of excitement. You can't deny that about what's going to happen moving forward because we saw this coming and there was no surprise. It's rare when a premiership coach goes, Drew, that there isn't a chorus out there somewhere that is bemoaning the decision, that is criticising the decision. That was pretty much non-existent. So it was accepted largely, and it did come pretty quickly. I mean, you lose the North Melbourne game and you still think then, there's no way it can happen mid-season, not based on what's happened in the early parts and where we are as a club. But, it fell apart pretty quickly. The Hawthorn game really was the start of it. That was the straw that broke the camel's back, followed by the article in the West Australian. And we criticised the West a lot, and I think that is definitely fair. And there was a big swipe for one of their journos at the press conference yesterday. But that was good journalism because it hasn't been denied by anyone in the club. It's been backed up by some credible sources on the East, credible reporters on the East, I should say. And so those two elements, I think, spelled the end for Adam Simpson. And then the first quarter against Melbourne was the final nail. And then it just had to happen. The last 7 or 8 weeks of the season, it would have been untenable for everyone.
Yeah, well, Simpson was able to get a little boost out of the group at times this season, but in the end, it just wasn't sustainable. And so that has shone through over the last 6 or 7 weeks, losing to bottom 4 teams at home, and then at times non-competitive performances away. And then we spoke about something felt different in the Hawthorn game. He was thoroughly outcoached. The players didn't seem to be adhering to the systems, or it was a mixture of both. I thought I was leaning towards being at the game on Sunday. It seemed like breakdown from the players' perspective. There were a lot of errors made against Melbourne early. It's at times where, like when Cozzy Pickett just got out the back and he was on his own by about 50 metres, it seemed like breakdown from the players. And perhaps the combination in over 2 weeks of outcoached and then the players not able to execute the system or game plans, that's the worst of both worlds for a coach. And perhaps there was just nothing more that Simpson could do to get anything out of the players. I've got no doubt if Simpson hadn't been sacked this week, we would have copped a fair hiding from the Lions on Sunday, and it probably would have happened next week anyway.
Yeah.
But one thing I noticed yesterday, and I guess it was still pretty fresh for Simpson, and it happened really quickly. Monday night into a board meeting on Tuesday, and then by lunchtime, the statement's been made. The players are out there training, assistants, looking after them as the discussions are going on behind the scenes. Like the journos had gathered for a Tim Kelly press conference, like the cameras were rolling. Like we had a live feed of that presser waiting for it to come in. And then a minute after it was due to start, West Coast cancelled it and said there was, due to ongoing things behind the scenes at the club, yada, yada. And that's when he knew that it was going to end fairly quickly. So one thing I just wanted to touch on from Simo yesterday, he spoke a lot about we and us. He was still talking about the playing group and the club as if the club was a part of him, as if the playing group was his.
Yeah. And
that's understandable because he's been there for 11 years. But that was something that made me emotional, was how often he was still talking about us. And that gave me a sense that he would have kept going.
Yeah,
he would have battled through.
Yeah.
If Pike had have come back to him and said, we still want you to coach it this season and we back you, we've seen that you can get the best out of this group. If it had have been a different message from above, that he would have kept going. Perhaps he just didn't know, or he wasn't willing to accept that it was probably done.
Undoubtedly. It was, the whole mutual decision. That's clever crafting of words and clever. And Simo's got a say in that, all right, how are we putting this together? It happens in so many industries and so many jobs that are of a public nature. Once he was told that next year there's going to be a change from next season, he just said, well, let's do it now. But there's also a financial aspect, Rui. So if Adam Simpson resigns out of hand, well, then the club is not obligated to pay out his contract. So, and you can understand him. Anyone in that situation would do the same thing. Well, no, if you want rid of me, you've got to sack me and pay me out. So it would have been massaged situation from both ends. Adam Simpson's manager involved. All right, what's happening here financially? You want him gone? Let's come to some sort of agreement. And it sounds like the full contract is being adhered to, and whatever. Fans don't care about that. But I'm saying from Adam Simpson's point of view, that's how he has to manage it. So he doesn't necessarily want to resign out of hand because that then becomes compromised. But once he knew that he wasn't going to be a part of it moving forward, and he would have felt that from a week or two ago anyway, it's time to go now. And I think if the player sentiment was different, if they were just tired of the voice, which they clearly are, and uninspired, then maybe you can get to the end of the season. But when you've got this mutiny aspect to it, and I said this after our last pod on X, on Twitter, that's very rare. That press conference I thought last Friday was extremely rare. A coach being questioned about a player mutiny. And Simo handled it well, as he always does. But that's not something that happens very often in sport, never mind at our football club. And so once it got to that stage, you knew it was a matter of time, and he would have known that in his own mind as well. So it had to happen now. He just couldn't get through to the end of the season with that in the background, and Simo was aware of that, and they just came to a smart conclusion in the end, and Jared Schofield steps in as interim coach. I thought it might be Matty Knights, but Schofield's fine, and we start the process for the next one, which we'll get to, the contenders. Before we do all that and we talk about whether Simo will coach this weekend and the decision, let's pay tribute, Drewy. We know how badly it's fallen apart, and we know about the 60-odd losses in the last less than 80 games, whatever it is. I mean, it's an abhorrent record. But let's talk about the Simo legacy and some of the great moments and where he's just given us all-time Eagles adulation since stepping in after John Worsfold. You can take it away.
Yeah, so one thing I thought of yesterday in regards to the hiring of Adam Simpson was I don't think we could have nailed our coach hiring after John Worsfold any better.
Yeah,
I reckon Adam Simpson was the perfect person. 38 years of age, hungry for an opportunity, great football acumen, superb playing career. He was coming from outside the club, outside of WA, which was just what we needed after having John Worsfold as coach, because he was such a part of the fabric of the football club. Just having someone come in with fresh ideas to bring something new to the club, that was perfect. So Nizzy and the entire team at that time absolutely lay down Mazaire, dominated that coach hiring, and he nailed the interview. Simo, it was the first one that he'd done for a head coaching role.
Wow.
And he beat out Lee Tudor and Peter Sumich. There might have been a couple other names in there, but they were sort of, we know about Suma, but so they were elder statesmen in terms of being assistant coaches. It would have been a more experienced hire, but perhaps didn't come in with the fresh ideas that Simo had. So he knocked their socks off with his presentation. And Peter Sumich was so confident that he'd got the role that Kim Hagdorn actually said on 6PR that Sumich had it, only for Simpson to eventually get the job. So we absolutely nailed that. And he didn't make the finals in his first season, but the building blocks put in place, young players were developing, and then 2015, we know how great a season that we had. And to be honest, if you take into account the form that we had going into the grand final, you play that game 10 times, we'd probably win 5 or 6 of them. We'd just beaten Hawthorn a few weeks before. They jumped us in the first quarter, hot day. And then if Darling doesn't drop that mark, we're back within 2 or 3 goals. And Hawthorn have said subsequently that they were cooked at halftime. It was so hot. Anyway, that doesn't work out. And then we tried a few things over the next couple of years. And then, absolute masterstroke in 2018, considering how dominant that Richmond team was, for us to be able to take that flag with Gaff, Natanui and Shepherd, 3 All-Australians out of the side, to make that work for Lysett and Vardy to tag Grundy in the grand final, and then to be 5 goals down. I mean, reflecting on it now, it was an absolutely unbelievable effort to win that flag. And, obviously we're going to remember it so fondly. It'll be the best West Coast flag of my lifetime, no matter what happens from now on. It was the perfect time, perfect age. I had 30 friends in town from Perth in Melbourne, all able to get together after the game and celebrate. So we'll all cherish those memories under Adam Simpson. 6 years in a row of finals. If Tom Barrass doesn't have that total meltdown against Hawthorn in 2019 and we finish in the top 4, who knows what might have happened. And then we were 12-5 in the COVID year, despite all of the crap that went down and the way that the club has admitted they didn't handle it as well as they could have. We were still 12-5. We only missed top 4 on percentage, and that touched ball on the line against the Western Bulldogs. Maybe things go differently. So, he had the group up and firing for a 6-year period, contending for flags. And then obviously since that Richmond game, things unfortunately have gone the wrong way. And it appears that he hasn't been able to keep up with the modern day tactics of footy, and his game plan has become a bit tired. But his overall performance and legacy as West Coast coach has been outstanding.
Yeah, I actually watched the Richmond game late last night. That's one thing I did after Simo's departure. I was like, okay, let me go back and watch that moment. I need to watch something that feels like the right thing to watch, because it was an awesome moment, but then it fell apart straight afterwards. I've got some thoughts on that in a moment. But yeah, He was, 6 straight finals appearances from his second season. And I think the 2018 premiership, that game almost sums up what Simo was. Like, tactically, we were just so well drilled. Defensively, especially. I think that's what we always had. 2015, the web, the way in which we structured up defensively, the zoning off. I mean, you see so much of it now. Simo is at the forefront of that. Getting guys to have a man defensively, but then you zone off into this space as well, and you cut out the angles. We were the team to really perfect that, around 2015. And the hallmarks of that was still there all the way through to that grand final. And we see it late on with that final play, McGovern to Vardy, McGovern zoning off, no Shepherd there. Schofield's able to step up. The defensive class was the hallmark, I think, of his game. And then just brilliant ball winners and the ability to score quickly and the ability to stay composed. That's what I loved about the Adam Simpson teams. And that grand final sums it up as well. We're 5 goals down at quarter time and they don't panic. They learn a lot from 2015, of course. But Simo was just all throughout his tenure. I mean, he made a couple of mistakes in press conferences and maybe around the COVID time, he got a little bit emotional and said a couple of things out of turn. But you look at the 11 years, just always so calm, always so smart, always gave you the feeling that he was in control. And that's what you want as a playing group and a supporter base, that you're never rattled by the pressure and the stress and the changes and everything that comes with top level sport. So yeah, just brilliant in that sense. And we were just really lucky to have him. It was a great choice by the executives at the time to replace John Worsfold. And guess we're in a similar situation now to when Simo took over. We just need a fresh voice. We need fresh inspiration. The players are yearning for that. And I did go back, Drewy, and watch that game in 2021 against Richmond, and such an awesome moment. And we go into the bye and we're in the 8. And that's when Simo gets re-signed, Drewy. So, a lot of people say, why did they re-sign Simo? And maybe the contract had a year on it too many. I think that's probably fair criticism. But man, we've gone from a flag in 2018 to 5th in 2019, 5th in 2020. We're in the 8 in 2021, having beaten Richmond at home. Of course he's getting an extension then. But you watch that game and you think, how did it fall apart so badly after that? I think there are trends that started before in terms of some complacency, which we've spoken about. The loss to Hawthorn in 2019, the COVID attitude in 2020. But then it's just so stark. And you look at that game and, mate, there are guys playing in that game. Luke Edwards, who has a big last quarter. Harry Edwards is playing in that game. Jermaine Jones is playing in that game. I'm watching it, I'm thinking, how is Luke Edwards not kicked on? I know he's had injuries, but how is he at a point right now after that game where, we're not sure if he's going to be on the list next year? How is Jermaine Jones not delivered more? How is Harry Edwards, okay, he's coming into form now and he looks good, but what's happened to some of those young players? How have they not stepped up and become hallmark players? And then the others with injuries, we know, Liam Ryan and Elliot Yeo, who were massive in that game, and the injuries that have held them back. But it was just so stark to me. And I actually got a little bit emotional, a little bit sad at the end, watching the celebrations and Optus rocking as to how it fell apart so badly from that point. And that, unfortunately, was hard to believe at the beginning of the end for Adam Simpson.
Well, that goes down as one of the great Optus Stadium moments, the Josh Kennedy goal. And to think since then, we've probably only had 2 signature moments that we'll remember in terms of Harley Reid v Melbourne and Harley Reid v Fremantle. But since then, can you remember really anything that maybe Elijah Hewitt kicked that really good goal against St Kilda last season? But there's not a lot.
No. The Bulldogs win. I mean, that was away from home late in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was off the back of
We've won 8 games. We won 8 games.
Yeah.
In the last 2.5 years. There's not much, mate.
Yeah. I even thought before Simo had been sacked, maybe it was on Sunday. I was pretty disappointed leaving the MCG on Sunday. And I think I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if Garby and I will do a podcast this week. It's just hard, getting yourself up to after a loss to talk about. I mean, we're talking about it as if we're playing, but getting yourself up after a loss to talk about the Eagles and trying to find positives and say all the same things we've said for the last 70 games where we've only won 10. So Yeah, it was time for a change. And, you said to me, but you said before, and you said to me, there's some sort of feeling of optimism about what's next, because we've been stuck in the mud. We've been in a mire. Like, it's just been, I mean, let's be honest, it's been horrible.
Been embarrassing.
Like, to the point where we're two of the most passionate West Coast fans that I know. And we're talking about, is it worth the time investment to watch the team play? Because you kind of know what's going to happen. Like, that's the lowest of the low as far as being a supporter, is wondering whether it's even worth your time. So, yeah, I think even if Adam Simpson reflected on that, he would be disappointed that that's what the club's produced over the last few years. And ultimately, it couldn't get worse. So a new voice, we've seen what it can do with Adam Kingsley and Craig McRae, and there's plenty of other examples of it. So someone young and fresh with new ideas and to invigorate the group is going to be a positive for us. Have you found yourself wondering about the text messages, like who sent them? The West is reporting that there was a star senior player. That was one of them.
I haven't found that. We're going to get into the contenders in a moment. It doesn't really matter. Like, I don't really care who sent them, because, to be honest, Drewy, I think it's a feeling amongst enough of the playing group. That's my feeling, and that's without any intimate knowledge of who might have sent them. I get the feeling that it's a cross-section of established players, disgruntled players, young players. And I don't think any of it is a personal dislike of Simo. I think they're just desperate for a fresh voice. They can sense it. I mean, Drewy, like, I speak for most fans here. Like, I got tired watching the press conferences and bored watching the press conferences in recent times after games. Same responses in the lead up. Imagine what the players are feeling if they're hearing the same messages, 4 times a week. Like, that's not a crack. It's just they're desperate for something new. They don't want to waste their careers away. And there's nothing against Simo. They know they need that fresh voice and approach.
Well, interestingly, Simo did say that, or maybe someone else from the club said that the players took ownership of some of the meetings after the Hawthorn game.
Yep.
In the lead up to the Melbourne game. So perhaps even Simpson himself had accepted that the message just simply wasn't getting through.
Yeah. And he said yesterday in his presser, it's been really tense. He said there's been a lot of tension. I reckon that's amongst the playing group. That's walking the halls and seeing Don Pike, and, it gets a bit awkward because you can start to feel that, it's coming. We've all been in similar situations like that in different manner and in different ways in life. And yeah, I reckon amongst the playing group, you could tell there was tension and that there wasn't a warmth amongst them anymore. He could probably feel it.
So there was a video going around last night. I don't know if you've seen it, with Harley Reid, where Simpson walks into the presser and he walks past Reid and appears to say something to him. Have you seen that?
Yes, I have. I can't make out what's said. I can see that Reid is smiling at one stage, but it seemed to me like there was a little joke between the two. Now, they'd spoken just before, right? That's not the first time that Simo had spoken. He'd addressed the players. So I don't know if there's anything sinister there. And then Harley Reid has put up a social media post last night. I couldn't thank this bloke enough for what he's done in such a short time in my career. One of the greatest to do it. And he's put up with so much crap. Love heart. So I didn't think there was anything in it. What did you make of it? What do you think was said?
Well, no, the suggestion was that he said to Reid, "You've had your say." And I guess the link being made was Harley Reid one of the people that sent the text messages, as in he's had his say and it's got out. But then some people are saying, he's saying to Reid, "You've got to stay."
Right.
I can't tell. Right. I can't tell what he says.
I can't tell.
Was there some sort of sarcastic joke where Simpson was sort of making light of all the media there and like the attention is like, you've got to stay, mate, and enjoy this?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's so hard to make out. People will draw a longbow and say that Harley, you had your says and Harley Reid tried to get Simo out, but Harley Reid sitting there smiling. They probably had a joke in the meeting with the players before, and then it's carried on. I didn't think there was anything sinister in it, but who knows? We're all just guessing, aren't we?
No, my instinctual reaction is that there's nothing untoward about it. I couldn't imagine that Reid would be complaining about the coach.
No.
And this is what happened with Horn Francis. Horn Francis didn't like David Noble, and North Melbourne didn't want to sack him so quickly. And then they did, but then Horn Francis left anyway. I'm not saying it's the same situation, but it just an interesting side note, just something that had come up last night.
Yeah.
Did you have anything else more to say about Simo?
Well, I want to talk about the likelihood of the farewell on Sunday.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So that I want to get into. I did a poll on Twitter last night asking fans, do they want Simo to coach on Sunday? 208 votes. As it stands, 56% saying yes, give us a farewell, 44% saying no, time to move forward. I reckon when a coach has been let go, Drewy, and you've asked that question about whether you want him to coach a farewell game, if it's close enough to a 50-50 split, which it kind of is, not far off, I don't see the rationale in the farewell coaching game. I think it's got to be an 80-20 type scenario, like overwhelming support for it. If it was the final game of the season, I'd be in agreement with the farewell game or the final home game of the season. I'm not a fan of it. To be honest, it's the first time since Don Pyke's come on board that I've thought, I think that's the wrong call. Never mind the lack of clarity at the beginning of the press conference. I think that's been overblown a little bit. That didn't bother me too much, but although it wasn't ideal, I just didn't rate the call to offer the farewell game. And I actually hope Simo says no as an Eagles fan, because we've got 7 or 8 games to go. Now is the time for mine to be ruthless about everything, right? Like the players should be carrying some guilt about this. The players have a lot to answer for. And that guilt and that feeling should be going into Sunday's game. Desperate to atone. Young players desperate to make a name for themselves. Players on the edge who are fighting for their careers, desperate to try and win a new contract. Experienced players desperate to try and restore some pride for the club, for themselves. That should be the overwhelming feeling. My understanding is Matthew Knights and Jared Schofield led a scathing match review on Tuesday morning when they probably had word that Simo was gone. They probably would have known by then, and ripped into the players. I want that carrying into Sunday's game and for the rest of the season. And I think if you have a farewell game, it's kind of like a 4 quarters lap of honor. And I think it just sucks a little bit of that out of it, Drewy. It just becomes a celebration for Simo and the result becomes secondary and the players start, desperate to atone. But then by halftime, the crowd's just happy and every time Simo goes up on the main screen, everyone cheers. And then they just feel like, oh, well, this is a celebration game today. Whatever happens, we were all right. It just takes some of that edge out of it. We've had enough sentiment at this club in the last few years, and it's got us into this mess a little bit. I think the time for sentiment is over. Let's get angry for the next 7 weeks and see where that takes us into next season.
Honestly, I don't think you could have articulated that better. So, well done. I think that I don't want to say offensive. I just don't like the idea of sacking someone and then saying, but hey, can you come and do your job one more time, even though you know you're gone and we don't want you? Like, I think that's a little bit of a slap in the face. I get what they're trying to do. And I think maybe Pyke is thinking about the last couple of years when we've had these nice send-offs for JK and for Shuey and that Nui. And, there's been these last games of the season, both against Adelaide, where we've had a bit of a celebration. And it's like, oh, so should we transition out our coach in a similar manner? But this is just not the same. And you're right, it's too early in the season, or there's not, if with 7 games to go, to just throw away a game as a tribute match or whatever you want to call it. If I were the Eagles, I would say, look, we want to do this in the right way. You've served the club so well. You're a premiership coach. You mean so much to us. Would you come back and watch the game in a box for the last game of this season, and we'll do a tribute video and, we'll give the fans a chance to applaud you at halftime. You can come out or whatever, or maybe you do it the first home game of next season. Organise something to say farewell and to say thanks, but a tribute coaching game when like he can't, like he's not rocking up at the club today, is he? Like, and he's going to sit in his office.
Yeah.
Can't walk around the club having been sacked. He can't take training. Matthew Knights and Jared Schofield don't want Simo there looking over their shoulder. Like it just doesn't work. And then, so what, he's going to have the rest of the week off and then come in on Sunday and coach. Like, that to me doesn't make sense either.
Yeah.
This is not for Adam. This is for the fans, and this is for the club to maybe say farewell, and maybe, you know, are they trying to sort of cushion the guilt that they feel, or I don't know. Adam Simpson's been through the fucking ringer.
Yeah.
And I don't think he needs, you know, a handout for 4 or 5 more days.
No, it's Gerard Whateley made a great point on 360 last night, talking about some of the farewells, and some of them have been good, but they've been at different times. You have to take them all in context. He said Peter Schwab had one at Hawthorn. He was there for a quarter of the time at Simo at the Eagles. And he said he found himself watching cartoons the morning of the game, and he realised, what am I doing?
Yeah,
I've checked out. Simo will have checked out, and so he should. Go have a break, mate. We're doing this for 11 years. It's just not the right feeling and the right move for the club right now. So I really hope he says no. It should never have been offered to him. Don Pike and Paul Fitzpatrick should never have offered it to him. You know what I thought about, Drewy, when it came to the farewell game, as well as I pondered it more last night? We're going to get into the contenders to replace Simo in a moment. It reminded me of Guy McKenna's last game in 2000, when we were terrible under Ken Judge. We played Melbourne in the final round of the season. The Demons were a hot team then. They made the grand final where Woden won the Brownlow. We got smashed by about 70 points. And all we did in the second half of the game, maybe the last quarter, was try and hit up Guy McKenna inside forward 50 for him to kick a goal in his last game. And he did, and it was a great moment. But I remember then, even as a 17-year-old, being a little bit embarrassed. Like, are you serious? This is a game at home, and all we're worried about is a legend kicking a goal in the last quarter while the opposition beats us by like 70 points or something on our own patch. Like, come on, we're better than that. It was like a gimmick. I just don't want Sunday to be a gimmick. I want us to go out there and play with some friggin' passion and pain and take it to Brisbane.
Imagine we do the histrionics of Simo coaching, and there's clapping and there's all this niceness pre-game, and then the Lions pile on 6 goals in the first 8 minutes.
I mean, it'd be a joke. It'd be an absolute joke.
I don't think it works. And anyway, we might end up looking silly if Simo says yes and the podcast drops later. But if he says yes to it,
my view will stand either way.
If he says yes to it, good luck to him, and I'll watch the game with intrigue as to see how it goes. But personally, I would feel more comfortable, doing some sort of tribute in another way, and then give it time to breathe. We can pay tribute another way, and watching Jared Schofield lead the team on Sunday. So, Graham, Cox, Buckley, Hansen, Josh Carr. Outside of that 5, can you see any other contenders? And then you maybe give us your thoughts on Cox in particular.
I think Gin Siracusa sounds like a contender.
Yep.
So that's one. There's no one else that really stands out. Andrew McWalter did nicely at Richmond, but if he was that good, he would have got the job over Rizzo, I think.
What about Montgomery? He's quite
I'm really impressed by Montgomery at the Giants. He's one I'd like the Eagles to look at. Really impressed by him. And as is always the giveaway, I work closely with the Giants. As is always the giveaway with an assistant coach, do the players mention them out of turn? They mentioned Brett Montgomery a lot last season, the Giants, out of turn when talking about their resurgence. He's the right-hand man to Adam Kingsley. I think he's someone we should definitely talk to. He impresses me. I think the benefit of where we're at right now, my gut feeling is Josh Carr. Just a gut feeling. I don't care about his Fremantle history. It does not bother me one bit. If he's the best person for us, great. He just seems to me to have that fire, that toughness. He's been at the coalface of footy trends recently, looks ready for a senior coaching position. That's just my gut feel. The benefit we're in, the luxury we have, Drewy, is Don Pike has worked closely in a coaching box, not just at a club, but in a coaching box with Dean Cox for a number of years. He's a very good judge. If he feels as if Dean Cox is ready for this position, he will go for him. And if he doesn't, then we are comforted by that. It is pretty straightforward. Like, Don Pike is a rails ride on appraising Dean Cox. And so I feel as if we're going for him, all right, well, Don Pike sees something in him. Great. He feels as if he's ready for this. And if we don't, well, I'm even more comforted because, goodness, Don Pike would have seen that. So that makes me feel a bit more confident about where we're going.
Yeah, I completely agree, Reid. Dean Cox, we've got the perfect person in charge to make that decision. I think all the evidence is there that Josh Carr's ready to go, and Ken Hinkley seems to be right now safe in his role, but who knows what they do going forward with Hinkley. So that's the caveat with Josh Carr. Jamie Graham has been mentioned as a potential senior coach quite a lot, and he supposedly has been quite selective in terms of the jobs that he's gone for. Obviously, he used to be an assistant at West Coast, so there's people at the club who have insight into whether he's got the acumen and the temperament to be a head coach. So that's, again, another discussion going forward. I'm sure Fremantle can give us a bit of intel, given the ties location-wise to the club. Hansen, I don't know as much about him in his coaching journey, but he won a VFL premiership coaching Footscray. So he's coached his own team and had success, and then was poached by Carlton and Michael Voss. So obviously there's definitely some potential there. And then, yeah, we've heard good things about Montgomery. You've obviously backed that up. So, yeah, I guess they asked the question of Nathan Buckley, but the sense I got is similar to what Mark Robinson said last night on 360, which is that while his sons are sort of still need him, he's not going to isolate himself in Western Australia. So I'm not sure that's going to happen. So, yeah, the first name mentioned is really the one that gets the job, Garby. So there's a lot to play out still. And obviously Sydney could well be going until the last week of the season. So there's not going to be too many opportunities to have serious conversations with Cox before then. So if they love Cox at Sydney, they might come up with some succession plan and lock something down. Yeah.
So that would be really interesting as well. A lot to play out. We're running out of time, Drewy. Can we do a Twitter Spaces later this week to get to everyone's questions? Have you got time for us to do that? There's a lot of questions there from our listeners. Have you got time on Friday, perhaps? Maybe half an hour.
I like it. You're locking me down on record.
Can't say no now. So we'll try and get to everyone's questions on Friday on Twitter Spaces. The game against Brisbane on the weekend, this is going to be interesting. So we've got 45 seconds here. I can see the likes of Cully and True and a couple more debutants like a Bergil or a Clay Hall coming in now between now and the end of the season. I think someone like Darling is going to get dropped at some stage. Sheed might be sidelined a little bit, Drew. I think we can see that trend happening over the next 7 weeks.
And if Simo coaches, then Gaff and Sheed and everyone will play. And it'll be a farewell game for about 7 players.
Thanks, mate. I think we've covered it pretty well. We're going to get to some of your questions later on in the week. Leave us your thoughts. Thank you, Simo, for everything that you did. Forever an Eagles legend.